tap dancing on a landmine that kept going back and forth of satire and grief and like intellectual comedy and sadness. Like it kept shifting between it, and there's never a moment where the characters are like sobbing uncontrollably because someone died
Yeah.
or someone has a debilitating illness. But and again, this has a lot to do with the literary work it was adapted from. There's genuine depth.
Welcome back, everybody. We are wrapping up Black History Month today. We're talking about our final film, which is American Fiction, which is
2023
which is
American fiction.
2023. It was a Best Picture nominee, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. It had, it was a pretty big deal a couple years ago. And since then, so it's based on a book. We'll just get into this a little bit before we do pre-production, but based on a book by Percival Everett, who is perhaps better known for writing James, which was last year's book of the year for most, like Barnes and Noble and most of those things. A reimagining of Huckleberry Finn from the character of Jim's perspective. So he's a big deal in the literary side of things, and this was a big deal on film. This one was different than the other three, which is great. That's what we wanted, was diversity. Like, I don't want to be watching the same movie 4 weeks in a row. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I didn't mean diversity in that way. Like, that sounded super condescending and douchey. I meant like when we did Italian month. When we did Italian month, we did like an old one and a really colorful one, and like
you wanted variety,
not
diversity.
I mean, it is. They do. But since we're talking about race in this month specifically, I don't want it to sound like I meant it that way. But yes, variety is what I meant.
We're doing plots or subplots specifically for this episode.
Yes.
And for me, subplots are, for this film, it's the moral spine for the overall narrative
Mm-hmm.
of our time going through uh well, they all call him Monk, but the character's name is Thelonious Ellison, and the Thelonious Monk is kind of a good callback to music.
Yeah.
So is his pen name for the book Fuck, which is Stag R. Lee, which is the take on a song Stagger Lee, which is a blues song from the 50s. So we've really got an A and a B plot framing for the overall film. The A plot is, well, as I mentioned, Stagger Lee, the circus of publishing that book and his previous one.
Yeah.
And then the performance of him and some other characters we'll get into later, their authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the three A plots. And then for me, the subplots are the family, the grief, the caregiving of his mother,
Yeah.
and the intimacy and identity that he has with his love interest, but then also at the same time that his brother has with all of his circle of love interests or lovers that he has in the film as well.
That he has taken.
I was literally about to say that, like, that's gonna come in at least once.
Don't give it away. So what I wanted to start off with saying, like, why I wanted to do subplot on this movie. So I watched it. So I follow a lot of YouTube channels about writing, screenwriting, novels. I follow them all because I'm a writer and I like to learn more. And you should always be learning. I watched a video this past week. I will, if I can find it, I will share it in the notes, about subplots and how to do them correctly and how to do them crappy. and though he talks in the video, not about this movie, but he talks about a proper subplot should be enhancing, the B plot should be enhancing the A plot, whether it's
Okay.
enriching the themes, backing things up, bolstering the character work, there needs to be some element, and that gives you a lot of freedom still, right? Like there's a ton of different ways to do that. A bad subplot is when it seems like, oh crap, I can't just focus on this, so I need to throw something else in there to
Yeah.
make it not a short film, because like all A plot is a short film essentially. You need that B plot to kind of, because most people can't handle A plot start to finish. When you think about Die Hard, like, yes, we're in the A plot so much of the time, but there's that subplot of his wife, and there's we can cut to those moments of that tension to build things, and so you may not even notice that there is the B plot, which arguably means it's working well, right?
Yeah.
um it's not the only measure of it, but it does mean, that is a good measure of it. And so I had listened to that, and either I forget if I listened to it the day after I watched this or the day before I watched this, and then I was like, oh, this is like a perfect example of what that guy was talking about, doing it right. And this movie won Best Screenplay. I don't know if that was the only Oscar it won, but it did win Best Screenplay, and I think that really holds up. So I want to talk. Um, when we get into production, we'll talk about that side of it. But that's the subplot. So those subplots of his family, of his girlfriend, his interactions with his mother and his brother and sister, which are all separate, and
Hmm.
they, if you're not paying too much attention, you could almost say that they are two separate stories that don't seem to intertwine. But there is ways in which I think it absolutely intertwines thematically. Not
Okay.
not
Yes.
not as much
You need to be
in,
paying attention. You
yeah,
can't be like cursory watching this
right,
and then have some of these, like, for example, he and I chatted about this yesterday when we were working on a different project.
yeah,
And I said, wait, that part? What are you kidding? It doesn't make sense. What happens with it? So if you're not really paying attention, like I must have not been completely my first watch through, there's there's gonna be some moments that they don't seem to serve each other if you're not just
yeah,
listening to the interactions between Monk and his other family members, and
right,
specifically his publisher.
right. Okay, so let me for our audience explain. Alex kind of mentioned some of this, but like the plot is essentially he's a novelist who has written stuff that has it's been published, and he's had some minuscule level of success. He's a college professor. He's clearly got a chip on his shoulder about writing in general, and he is in a point where he has these financial crises that he needs to be successful in his work right now. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how the subplot connects, but that's not really what I think of. So at one point he's talking to his agent, and his agent says, they want something blacker, or I forget the wording, but like that's what they basically are saying is, the publishers want you to produce something blacker. And he goes, or something black. And he goes, I am a black man and I wrote this, so it is a black story. And, um, and that,
Like,
I mean,
well,
I don't know that that's the exact wording, but that line is basically there as I just said it. And that line is the key to connecting the subplot and the main plot, because,
yeah.
we then get to see his story of who he is in the confines of his family, and then we also get to see him go off on what was advertised, what is the A plot, what was in the trailers, the more sensational thing, which is he then writes this book he writes it kind of sarcastically like a fed up rage. Essentially, he writes this book which is very stereotypical, and he thinks it's problematic, and he's giving into a lot of the tropes of black writing. And
And he wishes it didn't become successful.
Right. Well, he
So
has no intention of it being
under
successful. It's
he
a
has no
fuck
intention.
you.
Understand, yeah, understand that, audience, he wanted this to fail
Hmm.
so that his big intellectual mind has this giant like realization that no, pandering to white people as a black author and writing all the tropes of a hard luck story, and even
Hmm.
worse, writing in the tone and language
Yeah.
of a typical black or urban person, he becomes annoyed that it's
Right.
successful. Like it crushes him that it works.
Right.
And do you want to talk about the other character?
The woman, no, well, so I want to say, like, so that sets us off on the A plot, which is this frustrating success that he has, and he has to use a pseudonym and hide his identity because he's
Yeah.
known enough that he can't be this other person. So
Mm-hmm.
he creates Stag R. Lee, in and really it is it's he wants it to be sent out to the publishers like, oh, you asked for something black, here's something obnoxious. Essentially that's what he's trying to do, is like, this is the obnoxious version of what I think
Yeah.
you asked for, and they're all eating it up, which drives him crazy. And he doubles down at one point. He's like, actually, the first title is um my my pathology. So it's not
There it
pathology, it's
is. Yeah.
pathology. um and so he calls the book My Pathology. And eventually when they're like, yeah, this is great, he's like, okay, he doubles down, and instead he's like, how about we just call the book Fuck? And they're like, I don't know that we can do that. And he goes, no, we're going to call it Fuck. I want to call it Fuck. You want to buy the book? It's called Fuck. He's and
And
like,
he's on the phone with the
yeah,
publisher
yeah.
trying to, or the distributor trying to get this book out. He's like,
He's trying to bomb.
oh,
He's trying to
well,
tank it,
yeah,
essentially.
he's trying to get it to just not work.
It,
And
yeah. So
all his best efforts don't work.
it becomes one of those stories of like, uh like failing upward or whatever they would call it. And so
Yeah.
so that's the A plot, and that's all about race. And then the B plot is about his family, about a romance that he has, and it's his story. It's the who he is. It is a real story that, like, if you watch that movie, like, as a white person, I watched that movie, and that part of it I could absolutely relate to. He's got a
Yeah.
parent who has dementia. I have a parent who has dementia. He has siblings that there are complicated relationships with. Like, it's so universal, and at no point does it
Hmm.
feel like it's like they're not black. Like, it doesn't feel like their identities, like sometimes they say, like, I forget what the people sometimes just write a character and then they cast a black person, but there's nothing that makes that black. Well, these characters are black.
Yeah.
They are educated and proud, and like there are all these. It's very similar to, not that we love to talk about the Cosby Show, but like how the Huxtables are black, but they are a universal thing we can all kind of understand too. And so this is a universal
Yeah.
story that doesn't deny their blackness. It's not just like, oh, we took a bunch of black people and put them in a white situation. It's a universal situation. And that's what his point was in that opening sentence. And that's why it's so perfect that, like, his he wanted he wanted success on his terms, didn't get it as far as his career, and his and he wanted nothing to do with his family. And not that his family life gets a lot better, but it kind of reaches an understanding. It starts to it there's complications, and it's definitely some ups and downs, but him and his brother find something along the lines of understanding each other. His sister and him are on pretty good terms until she passes away early in the film. His mother and him seem to be okay in regard, other than she's got dementia and there's like that
Yeah.
complication. So, like, all of the things that he kind of is complaining about in the opening scene, he gets success there in a way. And then on the other side, he gets success in the way he absolutely doesn't want. um
Yeah.
and and so I thought that was a perfect juxtaposition. It covers that theme of this is what white people think they want from a black story, which is like the reformed drug dealer or whatever. Like, they don't
Yeah.
really go into what actually is in. There's that scene with Keith David, where and I loved the way that scene played out, where Thelonious is writing and Keith David and another guy are playing out the scene that he's writing in the room, like in front of
Yep.
him. And when
Mhm.
he pauses because he doesn't know what to do next, they'll turn to him and be like, "What do I say now?" And I loved the way that played out. It will come into play in my when we talk about what they did right, what they did wrong. I actually have some complaints about that, but I loved that. So that's keep watching. Uh, so that's why I think that this movie works on that like double level. That's why I thought Subplot was perfect here, because after watching that video where the guy talks about like a good subplot bolsters and contextualizes the A plot and does something there, this
Yeah.
does that. And that's and also I think when watching it I'm like, "Oh, that is amazing writing. This did deserve the best
Yeah, it did.
screenplay."
I really felt that every every like cliff scene where he pressures Monk is very much like respectability armor
Mhm.
that he is wearing. So there's a lot of scenarios where uh his brother will pull him out of some of his more deeper intellectual
Mhm.
understandings and just bring him to the nose on his face
Yeah.
and have that realization. But it also increases the respectability that that character has. And I
That
also,
sorry. I was just going to say, when it comes to Cliff specifically, is a really good example of how Thelonious feels about the rest of the family, because
yeah,
he has a chip on his shoulder about, like, he's a snob, and like they kind of allude to that a bunch. He's a snob, but his family's all doctors. Now we don't know what the mother did, I don't think, but he like basically says he's the one non-doc like medical doctor in the family. And so like these aren't idiots, right? Like this isn't like I'm a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist and you're a, I don't know, whatever unrespectable job. It's like
yeah,
these are doctors, but like even in that way he's a snob to them. And we see that play out best with Cliff, because at one point Cliff has prescribed their mother something to help her sleep or something, and he's like, "Why would you do that?" And he goes, "I'm a medical doctor. Why are you giving her drugs?" And he's like, "I'm a doctor." And Thelonious says, "You're a plastic surgeon," which is like, yeah, but they go to medical school, like, and like prescribing a sick parent something to sleep is probably not a big deal. I don't know
no,
that much, but like like so like it's not like this isn't like he gave her pentobarbital or like so one of these, like he's not like trying to put her to sleep like a dog, but like um like this is they're a very well-to-do, well-educated family,
yeah,
and Thelonious is still like and they kind of acknowledge it. At least his mother does. She says, your father was a genius, and being a genius can be really lonely and isolating. And unfortunately, that's why you connected with him so well, because you're a genius too. And we do see
yeah,
that play out, in the fact that like he, his girlfriend is a lawyer, right?
yep,
Yeah. So she's like, it's another educated, like high end, like what do we call those jobs that are not like they're white collar jobs. I don't know, like lawyers, doctors.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
white.
white collar.
Blue,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So these
blue
are
is
all
manual labor. White is like what we used to do.
white collar people, and he talks down to all of them.
Yeah.
At one point, he talks down to his girlfriend because she likes the other book that you were mentioning before, that you alluded to before, which is kind of what he bases his book on. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
or no, she reads fuck. That's what he's mad at her about. She
She
reads
reads,
fuck.
sorry, she reads fuck, and he is livid
Yeah.
that she
You like
likes
this
it
shit? Yeah. Which is
because he wrote it to be lowbrow. He
Yeah.
wrote it to pander to white people.
Yeah.
And his black, not like proud African wear the kente cloth black, but very much a I am a black woman, this is my identity.
Yeah.
Is how Coraline presents herself.
Yeah.
Her liking it to him is like slick and gross and beneath her
Mm.
and beneath him. And surprise audience, he doesn't know he wrote it.
She doesn't know. And
She doesn't know. So the Coraline
yeah.
subplot for me, like
And
the
they get
chemistry between them isn't always fireworks. It's like discomfort and honesty.
yeah.
Was always kind of how they never argued, but they always had some heightened dialogue that
Yeah.
led me to think that she's gonna squeeze out of him that last bit of honesty or that last bit of fear that he has about his mother or about his career.
Their relationship to me reminds me of, like, they both are too young for what I think that relationship seems like. That relationship to me is when you see like a widower
They're
and a
married.
widow just
Yeah.
kind of like who like are like, oh yeah, we you know, like, I know that you've lost the love of your life and I've lost the love of my life, and we just want a companion. Like, that's the vibe that
They're
they
never
give in there.
giddy.
Yeah, there's never
They're
that
never
like,
giddy in love kind of thing.
which I'm
No.
fine
It's
with, but
always
like,
this serious, structured, like kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
But part of
The
that is
relationship that they go ahead.
that she's very clearly attracted to him. She and the Cliff kind of plays off that, like, too, like, why do you like this guy? And she's like, why do you like
Why
my
do you like my
brother?
brother?
And she's
Yeah.
like, because he's funny. And he's like, I guess in a pathetic, like, Bambi like kind of
I
way or
love how he
something.
just like downplays
Yeah.
Monk so hard. He's like,
And
yeah, in like a shit way.
and then, like, I don't see Monk at this point in his life being capable of that, like, flirty, giddy romance, like, at all. But
No, I think he's too serious.
well, yeah, but
I
yes,
His character is so serious, and I think being Black History Month, I think that is a perfect example of in intellectual or creative spaces.
mhm,
There are many times where Black people will code switch into an entirely like very serious, staid, especially in the intellectual space, very staid, kind of a steady personality where there's not a lot of spikes or fireworks or like spark. It's just very even keel. And I had coworkers of my grandfather who was a professor, college professor, and all the Black professors were this very same thing. They were very intellectual, very staid, very calm. My giddy grandfather was the spark between the two of them all the time, right?
yeah. So
So she acts that way, and so does he.
so let me ask you this. So, you know, back to the idea of code switching for a second. Code switching, as I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but as I understand it, to explain it best, is typically Black people, but it could be for any group of like
Non-white.
any marginalized group. So I'm sure gay
Yeah.
people code switch, and it
Oh yeah, I
is
can
it
see that.
is essentially switching the way you talk, the way you present, in order to assimilate, make yourself more not endearing, to
Acceptable.
acceptable to the majority. In this case, white people. And so we think about Black code switching as becoming more like proper grammar or whatever. Like, that's kind of the stereotypical. This movie switches that around, which is kind of interesting too, because the code switching to make white people more comfortable in this is when he becomes more what they think Black people are.
I was
And
literally about to say when he like made his title PH instead of F,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then when he wants to go even farther and just names the book fuck, like
hmm,
he is. I mean, yes, it was all he was trying to make
yeah,
it fail,
yeah.
but
And
at
when
the
they
same
wanted to,
time, every time he went to that next rung, the white people are like, oh no, this is even better. It's even
Right.
more what we expected, and
Right.
it's gross, but it worked.
And when you think about code switching in that sense of like, he's turned it back, like kind of backwards on it. So like there's
Yeah,
this need for, that who he is the Thelonious we see with his family and his friends like that. And
yeah,
he has to code switch into Stagger Lee and and do that. And that's an interesting
yeah.
take. It's also funny
I did a bid.
after watching, yeah. uh, I want to talk about his. I want to talk about some of the funny parts in a minute, but because there's two parts that really stand out to me as like fucking hilarious. But that code switching thing is also interesting. After last week watching "Sorry to Bother You," in the scene where we've seen what's Cash at last week.
Cash screen.
We saw Cash doing white voice, and then eventually Army Hammer is like, no, drop the white voice here, and like he wants, and so like he has to code switch back as a performance back to like the way he normally talks or whatever, and then
Yeah.
in order to appease the crowd of white people, where I only remember him and the Mr. Blank. I'm not going to beep it out this week. I'm sorry. Mr. Blank. I also realized that it looked like I'm saying something bad every time I said it last week. So,
But if they watched the movie like we told them
yeah.
to, it would make sense.
But Mr. Blank, they're the only black people, and it's all these white people staring at them. And so it's this performance thing.
Yeah,
And this is kind of that same sense of like, it's code switching in this way that we don't think about it. But
it's like code switching as performance instead of code switching as conformity.
yeah, yeah,
So it's not Cassius doing white voice to sell more slave labor. It's Thelonious Monk,
it's
Thelonious Ellison, sorry. It's
it's
Thelonious Ellison switching to try to just dash his career
yeah.
as
Well,
Stagger Lee,
it's also
but appease. Like, yeah.
it's also both of these movies kind of feature blackness as a commodity.
Oh.
And maybe more specifically the way that white people perceive or want to perceive blackness as a commodity. So like
Hmm.
we see last week, we see, the like when you're doing the sales, you got to be in white voice. But when you're here at the party and you want the promotions and you want to do all these things and and get where you're going in this job, you gotta rap for us, and you got to start not only yelling the N word, but
Being black.
letting all the white people yell the N word back to you. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
and so I mean, that movie is very specifically about capitalism and commodity. This movie though is it. It's not overall about that. Like none of the family stuff is about commodity at all. It's about
No, yeah,
it's a
yeah.
family film, and then on top of that, you have this layer of like, and here's what we do for our families to some extent. This is also for his ego, or it started off for his ego, but like eventually we see that like in order to pay for his mother to go into a nice place, he has to do that. Um, so I want to talk.
And yeah, so real quick on the mother thing, that's a point that him and Cliff have a bit of a meeting about this.
Yeah,
At the point Cliff realizes he wrote fuck, and then why would you do this? Like there's this realization for Thelonious Ellison that, well, I did it for my family, even if it's beneath me. I did it for my family, even though it cheapens
right.
my ability as a writer.
Yeah,
And there was a bit of his ego build, but that was
yeah,
like his ego death, is
right.
when he started accepting money to literally play for white people.
Yeah, yeah. And all these, like there was on a level of I'll back out, I'll back out, I'll back out, and then it was like this is going to be $5,000 a month to put your mother here, and then he
Hmm.
was kind of like,
Is that, oh,
okay, well,
um,
I'll do that, but
guess we're calling it fuck.
yeah. As far as what it got right, this movie has it gets a lot right. But one of the things that I want to talk about is there's humor, pretty good humor throughout the movie. And I want to mention my two or three favorite moments of humor. One is, um, you and I talked about it yesterday, and it's my favorite line in the whole movie. So, Cliff, Monk's brother, is gay, and he at one point they're on the phone together, and he says something about "I've taken a lover," and Monk goes, "Ew," and Cliff says, "Okay, homophobe," and he goes, "I'm not. I don't care that you've taken a lover. I care that you call it taking a lover." And I was laughing so hard because I feel that way sometimes. I'm like if it doesn't matter if you're a gay person, a straight person, whatever. There's certain phrasing where you're like, ugh, I don't love that. Like, I don't love it when people call each other babe. I don't like it, and that's not a like. But so when he said the taking a lover thing, I was laughing so hard. I think I woke Sarah up. Because it was great. Um, then there was another thing that I also really connected with, which is when there's this other minor, like I wouldn't. It's kind of a subplot, but toward where he takes on a role as a judge in this writing competition, and the head of the review or whatever it is calls him, and the conversation with this white head of the review, like the literary review, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
The whole conversation's hilarious. Like basically, like at one point he goes, "It's been brought to our attention. Do you know what this is?" And he goes, "Yeah, everyone who hasn't won knows what that is." And he's like, "Well, that's why I'm calling. It's and you're like, oh, is he gonna win? Is it gonna change things?"
Yeah.
And then he goes, "It's been brought to our attention that we have not had good representation on the board of judges, and we thought that you would be a good judge." And he goes, "Well, I'm glad that I was the first person that came to mind when you thought about what black person to hire so people won't get mad at you."
Yeah.
And he just says it,
I love
and the
that.
guy goes,
He just
"Thanks."
comes out
The guy like a
right.
hundred
Sees it as
percent
no issue.
So I like absolutely loved that part. And then towards the end of that conversation, Monk is like, "I don't really have the time or the effort to do this." And the guy goes, "Well, let me just say one more thing that might sell you on it. And that is that, like, for once you will actually get to judge, you'll get to officially
Other
judge,
writers' work.
you'll officially get to judge other writers instead of just casually doing it for fun." And he goes, "Yes, I'll take the job."
Yeah.
That part was so funny. And then the last thing that I thought was hilarious, and I knew how it was going to go down when I saw it, but he's having lunch with this studio head played by Adam Brody, and or a director. I don't know that. I don't know if they say what his specific role is, but he's some kind of filmmaker, and they want to like make an adaptation of Fuck or whatever. And he's meeting with the
Yeah.
guy, and it's his mother is across the street in his agent is basically watching her while he has this lunch, and then he sees an ambulance pull up outside of the building that his agent is at, and he just sprints out of the
Yes.
restaurant. And I'm laughing because I know exactly where it's going, but
Hmm.
he checks it's not his mother, it was somebody else randomly had a stroke on a different floor or whatever, like they're in. And then he goes, Did I blow it with whatever the Adam Brody character's name is?" And the agent goes, "No, actually, you sold him on it because the second you saw a siren, you just ran, and it made
You
him think
ran.
that it made him think that you were really like, afraid of
On
going
the
back to
run. Yeah.
jail." And I was like,
Yep.
hilarious. Like, it's so well written, that part. But all right,
It
so
is.
those are some of the things that I found amusing that were good, but there was a lot good. You go ahead and start with your stuff. And
So I really think so. Starting with what like I really felt editing wise hit is like, and I alluded to it earlier, the tonal kind of tap dancing on a landmine that kept going back and forth of satire and grief and like intellectual comedy and sadness. Like, it kept shifting between it, and there's never a moment where the characters are like sobbing uncontrollably because someone died
yeah,
or someone has a debilitating illness. But and again, this has a lot to do with the literary work it was adapted from. There's genuine depth to
yeah,
these characters that they don't need to sob into each other's shoulders to show that they're sad about something.
Right.
Um,
It
the
doesn't. This
the
is one of
com
those things that doesn't hold your hand emotionally. Like it doesn't play. There's that thing that really like sometimes we over explain in movies because we don't trust the audience. This trusts the
yeah,
audience, and it's like everyone has. If you have a family, which I know not everybody has a family, but if you have a family, you can connect to this. Like this is so universal, especially
it
as an
is.
American. The way that American family structures it up, I know
Yeah,
that like
specifically as an American or an American with aged family members, like
yeah,
parents who are still alive or aunts and uncles who are still alive, like you're going to experience this if you haven't already in the next 10 years.
yeah,
One of our co-hosts has experienced a few things in this
yeah,
already, and you specifically that are in this film. So we're in our 40s. It's not impossible to think that when I look at our demographics on YouTube Studio that I know the ages and demos of you people. You've
yeah,
experienced some of this.
yeah.
So the other thing that I think hit really well is the ending is edited more like an argument, and the fact that it exists as like a as a constructed sequence of possibles, options, or finishing tones is the point, even if the truth is like a rough draft when money and audience and appetite are present. So for me there I had a conflict with the ending, but on retrospect I'm like, oh, that's why it went that way.
Yeah.
That's what all these possibles were meant for. And you already mentioned it. My other big hit for editing that won for me is the comedy. Like the level of comedy. It's built in the silence
Hmm.
and the rests and the stops between the characters, and not the punchlines that they say.
Right.
In fact, really, the one that you and I like, where taken a lover, like that's not exactly a traditional punchline. The humor
Yeah.
is that Monk is like, oh, why would you call it that? Not that he took a lover and haha, gay people. Like it's
Yeah.
not that kind of like superficial comedy. It's kind of alluding to his intellectual.
Yeah.
And he's like, why would you ever say it like that? So those are
Yeah.
my editing wins.
Yeah.
My editing fail, and this was the biggest one. The middle of this film just felt like one more lap, and it wasn't that it was slow. It was paced well, but
Yeah.
the satire beats that repeat kind of the same idea in like that middle like two or three scenes. Monk is appalled at what he has to do. The machine keeps running because he needs the money.
Yeah.
It works thematically, but
Yeah.
pacing wise, you can feel it's like explaining it to me over again rather than it escalating into the height of conflict for the film. And
Yeah.
it's not even a heavy criticism of
Yeah.
mine. It's like I noticed it. Like, oh, that's a different color blue. Like it's that kind of, it's
Yeah.
bad, not it really hurt the film.
I think that a lot of it was Monk working through because, from like,
Yeah.
because what it starts off as, the staggerly thing and the fuck thing, what it starts off as and what it ends up as are very different. And so we need to have that transition period. And this movie does subtlety so much and so well that, like, I
Yeah.
think that it's hard. You almost could like not catch that that's what that metal bit is him going like, you talked about the ego versus ego death. Like, I think that's where we're getting there. Um,
Yeah.
my my criticism, my one criticism of it, and I mentioned that I loved that scene with Keith David, um, and the other guy, is that that scene works perfectly, but like you have that, and then you have nothing else like that until the ending where, and so like
Yeah. Okay.
it's a weird jarring like jolt out of the film language that this film has established.
Okay.
And so like that's the only thing is like I don't if you had done that more, I'd have been okay with it. Or if you hadn't done it at all, I'd have been okay with it. But like doing it just there and then at the end kind of felt like it didn't fit the because even when he's in full staggerly scenes where he's doing
Yeah.
that, we're watching the
I
interview on
did a
the
bit.
TV, we're watching the Adam Brody bit, like there's parts that are weird and wild about that, but there's nothing that
Yeah.
is like that full break from reality moment, like
No.
the
Until the end, literally until the end,
right.
where the
And
audience is not even sure. I wasn't even
right.
sure. Are we really watching the film still? Or
Yeah, and I liked both those scenes without that context difference. Like I actually
yeah.
think the ending works really well for me in a lot of ways, and obviously like the
Okay.
Keith David part, it works well. It's just that it tonally felt, it's kind of like when if you ever watch a TV series, and they'll give everybody they give 8 different directors, 8 different episodes, and like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and 7 of the directors are doing the same thing, and then one director's like, "What if we did it as a noir film?" And it's like, okay, like this felt like those,
And that's the one episode that all like the stands love,
yeah,
and the film people are like,
and you're
that
like,
was stupid.
or you're like, it works well. It works well within the confines of that specific thing, but it does feel
But as
out
soon
of
as you put them
place.
together,
And so
yeah.
like that's what it felt like to me, was like I liked those scenes within the confines of those scenes. They didn't connect 100% with the rest of the movie for me,
Yeah.
but they did
No, agreed.
thematically like back things up, like it, like I think that the end scenes where he's talking about the different ways it ended was, it wrapped up kind of both the Staggerly and the family slash Coraline
It
stuff,
did, yeah.
because it was like you don't get a clear ending on a story, like and there was a good thing about that in this, like you're not going to have this clear perfect bow on top ending when we see his sister being like ow ow ow, and then like we just cut to her being dead, and there is that moment, like we as readers or film goers expect a certain level of like, well, everything's going to be wrapped up nicely at the end, but that's not how life works. And this movie was
No.
so focused on what you expect versus what is real, that like giving us the ending that we expect, or that you would expect from a normal movie that was being made like this, and then being like, well, that doesn't work, that doesn't sell it to me, like is kind of going
Yeah.
like, and then not having any ending, like we don't know if Coraline does come back to him or what happens, we have no idea. And that's
Correct.
life, and it's also possible that like there, when you talk about death with somebody, like if you I remember when I was in middle school, one of my teachers husbands died, and her son was like 5 years older than us, we all kind of knew her son, and she was like, my son and my husband had a fight the morning before he died, like my son went to school pissed off, and my husband was pissed off, and my husband died. And like as people who've gone through, like Logan and I have been pissed off at each other, my dad and I have been pissed off
Yeah.
at each other, you have a redemption if you have time, but you don't always have time. And so like you'll kick yourself the fact that I fought with my dad the day he died, even though like that like in his head he knew, well, we'll be fine tomorrow, you just had to get to tomorrow. And so there is that level of like, there's a whole bunch of what's going to happen after the story ends that we just can't
Yeah.
know, and I think that worked perfectly in that way. That's why I like the ending, but I also, again,
Yeah.
don't love the taking you out of the reality, the film language of this movie. That part didn't connect 100% for me.
No, no. I'm gonna align with you on that, and when we get to our ratings, it's kind of obvious
Yeah.
that that's how I feel about it,
Yeah.
and it doesn't distract from how good a film it is.
Right.
It's maybe something that, as I mentioned, and I think Mike, you've mentioned somewhat on this episode, on these episodes before, that we have partners and family members who are less critical
Yeah.
or less intense film consumers or literary enjoyers as we are,
Yeah.
and we're going to notice these things. We criticize them, whereas the ending, my wife was, what, what, what happened?
Right.
Why thing stuff? And it's not that she couldn't understand it. She would have preferred the bow,
Right. Right.
but
And
it
that's
didn't
fine.
happen
But
because
Sarah
that's
brought,
less reality.
if Sarah had stayed awake, she probably would have as well. But there's also, so like, look at last week. Last week was a way weirder movie than this movie. But you knew that, and it was consistent the whole way through. It was consistently building the weird. This
Yeah.
movie, there's a weirdness to it, but there's nothing outside of reality weirdness, essentially. Like, even like, I
Yeah.
could absolutely see the scene with Adam Brody, with a guy being like, oh shit, my mom's across, like, I could see that. I could see a bunch of white executives being like, this is great. Like, I think we need to make it even more urban. We need to make it more, like, I could see that. And so, like, none of
I
the,
could
and
agree.
then, so to then have those two things that were, they just didn't 100% fit the vibe for me. But I like them within the context of them. So kind of gave my hot take as my criticism, to some extent. But I will, I'll say that, like, I think that this movie is, I want to read the book. I want to see what the difference is between,
Yeah, no,
the
I
book
do
is
too.
not called American Fiction. It's called Erasure. And like I said, that's by Percival Everett. Um, and there is like a weirdness of, like, whenever you read a book about a writer, you kind of wonder how autobiographical it is, right? And you got Percival Everett and Thelonious Ellison, and it's like, those names are, like, peculiar names, like, of a bygone era kind of thing. And Everett and Ellison aren't that far off. And yeah, yeah, that book is not about a writer, though. Anyway, that's my book for anybody that's watching. It's my first novel, The Dinner Party, which will be out on paperback on Cinco de Mayo. And I think you should, if you want, you could get it. I'll throw the link up in the show notes. You can get it for $9.99. It will be $13.99, but you can pre-order it for $9.99. So as far as
So are those your
reputation,
studio notes?
well, that's my hot. That was what I was going to start talking about, hot take. But also, like, we talk, when I
Okay.
talk about, like, this film's reputation or place in film history, is like one of the things we have that we kind of only talk about sometimes on about studio notes when it fits. I I don't hear it. It's only been 2 years, and I don't hear people talking about this movie. And I feel like this movie might be one of those ones that becomes kind of a sleeper hit. Like, in 5 years, people will be like, "Oh, if this was available on a streaming service, because we both had to kind of pay for this, or not pay for, we had to get trials for a thing. So, like, it's not
Yeah.
on a streaming service. If you put this on a streaming service, I think that people would really catch on again.
Yeah, I think it would get I think it would get some crazy ass traction.
But
I
I don't.
agree.
2 years out, I don't hear people talking about this. I think this was the year Oppenheimer came out. Am I right about that, or is it?
I think so.
Um,
23.
and, like, so that was a good year, but, like, we talk about Oppenheimer and Barbie and a few other movies, but, like, I do think that, like, or maybe this was the year that Everything Everywhere All at Once came out. But, like, it
No, no, this is Oppenheimer and because those are both made in 23, so they were for the
Barbie, yeah.
24 awards. Yeah.
All right, right, right. So anyway, the point being, like, this was a, like, it was well recognized at the time, but it has kind of faded away a little bit. Like, no one's talking about it the way they are about those. But I do think this is one of those movies that in 10 to 15 years, like, especially if it gets on, we don't have a, like, TBS the way we used to, like, where you just watch Breakfast Club or Shawshank all the time. So, like, movies don't have that same kind of cult, like, like, oh yeah, like, that was a really, like, underappreciated little gem. This is, I
Yeah.
think, if you put this on a streamer, like, I think this could be an underappreciated gem of a movie, like, because it's like, I would watch this again tonight if Sarah wanted to. Like, this is a really
Agreed.
fun movie and really well made. It just, for whatever reason, I'm surprised, but, like, it isn't that talked about, and that's kind of funny because that is kind of like, like if it had been more like outrageous black stuff, would it have been, like is it a victim
Oh.
of the thing going on in the movie? Like, is me saying the weird stuff, you know, didn't fit quite, is that part of the problem? It could be.
No, no, I actually like that take is that could it have been that if it pumped up literally the meta of the film, would it have been more successful because
Yeah.
Oppenheimer is such an obvious historical film
Yeah.
that's a drama and Barbie is a satirical drama slash comedy. This is just heavy duty real life, uncomfortable for less than 50% of the country.
Would you recommend this film?
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely. More easily than the other ones.
Right. And yeah, this one is one where I think like you could recommend this to a broader audience than the last three, and to all
Yes,
of almost all of Italian month. Um, but
that
yeah,
too.
this is like I could show this to my father-in-law. I could show this to my parents. I could show it to, like, you can't show it to kids because there's like swearing and sex stuff in there. But like
Yeah,
you could
that's
show
true.
it to a general audience of like any random adult who's okay with R rating, essentially. Like, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's nothing crazy in any given way, that's going to be like, oh, this is a sci, Sinners. I think the big thing is like, if you don't like vampire movies, you can't like that. There's a whole swath of people. There is no group that I think you couldn't show this to other than like children. You want to do your rating first, since you put your rating in first?
Yeah, I did. So for ratings, we have our two categories. So one is going to be fun and watchability, and the other is quality. My fun and watchability is a 9. We already hit on it. I think that if this, like Mike said, our childhood films were always on USA or
Yeah.
TBS or TNT, and they would run in the afternoon, mid mornings, and weekends.
Hmm.
And it would be, yes, it would be cut down for television, but at least it would be a way you could catch Star Wars on a random Friday afternoon.
Well, also, like, I feel like
And
there was a lot of movies that we like because, like, a Breakfast Club, Ferris
oh,
Bueller,
yeah,
Shawshank, like, and those are all good
yes,
movies, right? But they also like are so ubiquitous with our culture
yeah,
because they were available all the time. Like, if you
they
turned
were
on
available all the time.
TBS
Yeah,
any day in the 1990s, TBS, USA, one of those channels, you're going to get one of those three movies at some point throughout the day, pretty much, right? Like,
yeah.
that's kind of how it worked. And so those movies,
So,
everyone's seen them. That's our generation because of
yeah.
that.
No, agreed. So for me, the fun and watchability is a 9 because outside of a small amount of language and a small amount of maybe heavier racial themes that are a little more difficult for maybe an average 10-year-old to figure out, this is an easy recommendation. My quality is a 7, and I'm putting that because the ending is jarring for a lot of people. And also, the reason it's a 7 out of 10 on quality is when you look at Malcolm X or Sinners, like in comparison, those films hit so many of the cinematography or so many of the color or sound pieces that I really loved. So there's some polish that I didn't quite see, and that's why it's a 7. But keep in mind, a 7 still wins a lot of things.
Mm.
So this was a winner at a 7, and it's my chubby ass giving it that rating. So a filmmaker here is going to give you ratings that are even more in line with what maybe critics would think.
Yeah, I don't know. My explanation might be more, but I don't know. So my fun and watchability, I gave it a 9. Um, like I said, this movie was funny. Like this, it's not quite like Ace Ventura or The Mask or one of those kind of like funny movies where
That's all
you like,
punchline humor, and
yeah,
that's
yeah, like,
ugh.
but like this was for a movie, like a movie that isn't sold to you as a comedy. Like if you watch the
Yeah,
trailer, this wasn't like Jim Carrey in. Like this was a very sold to you as like kind of a drama with some weird stuff going on in it. I think that it given that it's like nothing's out of control, uncomfortable. It's very fun in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. So 9. Quality, I gave it an
No, and
8.
and you know what? Sorry, that's the other thing is that for these four films, like this is, I think, the easiest to just watch.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be the easiest to just put in front of an audience, which is why fun for us both is a 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to go into like quality. I gave it an 8. Um, I think that this movie is really well made. My one complaint in that about like it being not entirely consistent in that way is like why it's not a 9 or a 10. Um, I also think you compared it with Malcolm X and Sinners, and I absolutely understand that those movies are cinematic achievement style movies, but like when you think about great movies, sometimes there's certain great movies that you think about where production aesthetics aren't necessarily a big deal. So like Best
Okay.
Picture 1960 or so is The Apartment. And The Apartment is just like The Apartment could be a play as far as the story is concerned. And there's nothing production
I
wise, but
understand
like
how you're
that
seeing
movie's not
this.
less of a classic than like than a lot of other movies. Like Ben-Hur is the year before or after, and I feel like The Apartment's a better movie than Ben-Hur. Ben Stiller, uh, Ben-Hur. It's it. Yeah, I said Ben-Hur several times yesterday, and Alex every
He
time I
did.
did was like Ben Stiller,
Ben
which
Stiller.
if anybody knows what it's from, please let us know because he didn't remember. And um, but so anyway, I just don't think that like that way I try not to rate movies in comparison to each other, but comparison just within the context of itself. Um, like to me, I just think that it comparing it to you know Sinners, this movie did what it. There was nothing that was lackluster. So like I do think that
No.
visually it told the story it needed to tell within a cinematic visual language that made sense for it. Other than those little exceptions I talked about, um, like if you had some grandiose cinematography, you'd be like this is weird. Like sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that
That would push it up for me,
see
but I
that
don't think it fits here.
right, but it like sometimes having that like it's kind of like I've talked about this before, the Oscars rewarding the most acting and not just the best acting, and how like sometimes that the person who's doing the most visual thing is like, but and sometimes that's not what works in the movie. Like
True.
I actually really loved what was Scorsese's last movie, the um, Killers of the Flower Moon. I thought was an amazing movie, and I like Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor. He didn't fit in that movie for me because he was over the top, and everyone else is giving such a
Yeah.
subtle performance, and Leonardo DiCaprio is
Mhm.
acting the way he always acts, which is I'm the biggest actor in the world, and um,
Yeah, that's so
and
true.
so
Even
like
when he's sinking on a door.
and it's and when you're looking at like a bunch of different actors that can stand out a little bit differently, but like if you gave this
Yeah.
sweeping cinematography, it would be like why like sometimes
No,
you don't need the
now that you're saying that, it would make the rating higher, but now I'm like, no, it wouldn't because it doesn't fit. It
right
doesn't need it. How about it
right
doesn't need it?
right. It's kind of like, have you ever seen the Hitchcock, that vertigo effect where the foreground and the background shift? It needs to be
Hmm.
motivated. If you do that, if you just were throwing that in there and there's no reason for it, you're like, okay, that's a cool looking shot, but like it's almost distracting from. And so like in this, I think that they all of that, the cinematography, sound design, all those technical skills are
Hmm.
doing what they need to do without doing too much, without being like, because you're paying attention to the story. It's not like when I talked about that with
Yeah.
Chocolat, when we talked about Chocolat and I said this feels like a filmed play, there could be like a little bit better. That lends itself to some of what I was talking about a little bit more. Like that
Yeah.
could have had some of those like enhanced visuals This, if you had done anything more on the technical side of things, I think would have distracted from what the movie is.
So you were saying earlier in this episode about those episodic television shows where a different person directs, or a different actor
Yeah,
directs or produces a different episode. That
yeah,
one that goes wild and wants to make it film noir. Too much cinematography would have been
hmm,
that for this. It
yeah,
would have been out of place, doesn't fit, thematically off, and it would look like someone just wanted to get themselves a name on credits
yeah,
as like best cinematography, but it doesn't need any of that shit. So for
yeah.
me,
It would be
this
like
film
dropping.
fits.
Sometimes you don't want to drop Daniel Day Lewis into the room with what's the guy's name that directed Tommy Wiseau? Like, if you had Daniel Day Lewis doing his thing, then you'd be like, why the fuck is he in this movie? And I'm not saying that this movie's below good cinematography, but you'd be distracted by that fact, right? If this movie,
Yeah.
if you had like done big sweeping shots or like that, like Star Wars style sound design where the like it's like the sound
Mm.
effects and like then it would have distracted. We talked to you guys last week about going into March, and we were talking about like maybe we'll do directors and like do their underrated. We didn't get any suggestions, and ultimately what we did do was we went and we looked through all the list of movies that we had kind of thrown out there, and not a single one of them was streaming. And we're like, do we want to pay for 4 weeks in a row? We didn't want to pay for 4 weeks in a row of movies when we have like all these streaming services. And we are going to be doing Best Picture episode where we are going to be paying. We've already paid for some. We're going to pay for some others. So we were like, let's for the time being, like let's not go pick a month where we have to pay for everything. So what we decided to do, since next month is going to be the Oscars, we decided, and we're kind of, we're working on a short film right now, and Alex is the cinematographer, I'm the director. We are building our own ability to work together in those roles. We thought, why don't we go for Best Picture winners that also won cinematography? And then we narrowed it down to what is streaming. So as of right now, the movies that we have on that list, the only one that was kind of iffy, I would love for it to be an option, because I would love to watch it again, and is Lawrence of Arabia. But we'll put that one off because I don't think it's free. And we'll make a decision on the fourth one for sure. But
Yeah.
the three that are definites, and we'll start in chronological for the three that are definites. Next week we will watch The Last Emperor. We will add Titanic, and we will add Oppenheimer. Now, the ones that we know are also available for us on for free are American Beauty, The English Patient, Braveheart, Dances with Wolves, and A Man for All Seasons. We did not get all the way back in the list, but like the other one that I would like really be good with was The Bridge on the River Kwai, but I don't remember if that was that or On the Waterfront. But
Mm.
anyway, so Best Pictures that also won cinematography. So far, we have The Last Emperor, Titanic, and Oppenheimer. If you want to watch The Last Emperor, it is on HBO Max. That's where we're going to be watching it. Watch it with us for next week. Titanic's on Paramount Plus. Oppenheimer's on HBO Max. And then we will figure out that fourth spot. If you have a suggestion, or if you know where one of those other movies is, like a Best Picture / Best Cinematography winner is,
Let us know.
let us know, especially Lawrence of Arabia, because that's my personal pick.
Yeah.
Or Out of Africa is the other one I really want to, Out of Africa, Lawrence of Arabia, On the Waterfront, Bridge on the River Kwai. Those are all ones that I'd like to see,
Yeah.
because I've seen every single movie on the list except for one movie that won. I've not seen Birdman. It's the only Best Picture and Best Cinematography winner that I haven't seen. So, but yeah, so Last Emperor, HBO Max. Join us next week. And like always, please like and subscribe. If it's not you just hit the like and subscribe button below. Give us a comment to
Easy.
tell us what you want us to maybe do in April, since we are going into March and we've got that slate kind of set out. If you have an idea for a theme or whatever for April, we're happy to hear it. Or if you have a theme or an idea for movies, let us know. Like we're always excited to learn about that. If you want to get these episodes a little early, you're welcome to go on to our Patreon. We have a collection, which means that for like $26, you're going to get all of the episodes early. As soon as I'm done editing them, essentially they'll go up into that collection, and it's $26 for the entire year. And then I will say, like, with our best picture episode, like, I'll probably throw that up in there as soon as I'm done editing it, and then it will go up the day of or after the Oscars. So things like that as like bonus episodes. So that's $26 for the year. Helps us pay for some of these movies. That's really what we're going for. But yeah, Alex, you got any last thoughts?
No. Of our 4 films that were Black History Month, actually, I do have a thought. What is the one that if people are going to devote time to watch one of these, what is the one they need to see?
Malcolm X.
Okay.
And I'll explain it this way. Especially if you're a white audience member, there needs to be a level of recognition that this shouldn't be like feel good. Like, Black History Month should be a moment of reflection. For white people, it should be a moment of reflection of like what is something I don't know about Black culture, Black history that is like Sinners was great. I'm not like knocking Sinners. Sinners was probably my favorite of the 4 overall, but
It
Malcolm
is mine
X.
too.
We had someone commented in about Malcolm X about how college film professors won't. It's like one of the ones that they won't show, and it made people so uncomfortable. And I didn't know this when we did the episode, but after that movie, there were no Black directors doing Black biopics essentially until 12 Years a Slave, which is 20 years later, 20 something years later. Like,
and you were mentioning there was police presence at like the theaters because white people were scared to go see the Black movie.
Right.
Like,
and Malcolm X is the only true story of the 4. And Malcolm X is a person who, in the way that U.S. history has developed, is, I think, underrepresented, misunderstood. I think that we have a certain reverence for other Black figures of the civil rights movement, like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. And I think that Malcolm X was vilified in a way that is not justified, and is, if you add some of that context to it, is kind of like, it lends a lot. I'm reading the book that movie was based on right now, and there's even more context in there talking about his childhood, and it's really interesting, and he's a really important part of that time period that we have a cartoonish understanding of. So
I was going to echo that, and almost for the exact same reasons. I talked about in our Malcolm X episode how, as a more recently reformed liberal thinking individual, despite it was always under the surface, to express myself in that manner, that film was Malcolm X of the 4 was the one that gave me the most understanding and scope of a real historical figure, but also my place in that journey in time. So of the 4, if you want the best one to grow yourself, Malcolm X. What's your top recommendation for just, I want to watch a fun movie?
Probably Sinners.
Fun. Yeah, I was about to say, it's Sinners for me, because Sinners feels good to watch. Even though it has some stuff in it, it feels good to watch.
Sinners, certainly. I mean, I know that there's a vilification of white people certain white people in that movie, but like,
it's so historical, it feels distant.
It doesn't have that same level, which doesn't make me uncomfortable. Like the fact that there's not a single good white person in Malcolm X doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. True. But I know that it does for a lot of other people. Sinners doesn't really have that vibe in a way that like will make your average white person who doesn't want to sit in discomfort uncomfortable.
Hmm.
I think that Sorry to Bother You has a more nuanced relationship with non-black people in that movie
Hmm.
than some of these others, but I also think like that's going to be just so bizarre for an
Yeah,
average
that's a
audience.
hardest recommendation for me, and I agree.
And
I do.
and then American Fiction, I think, is like, if you're okay with a certain level of like, there's a lot of white cringe in that movie, you know, like there's a lot of hi my homie like kind of vibes, like from
Yeah.
white people in that movie, and it's not the same vilification like in Malcolm X, but it's certainly, there's no
It's
I
more nuanced. Like you need to be. It's not going to sit on your face. You need to be paying a little bit of attention to see it. And if
yeah,
you look at our ratings even say that. So the lowest of the four by a shade was Sorry to Bother You at 15 and a half.
yeah,
American Fiction, 16 and a half. And then Malcolm X 18, Sinners 18 and a half. So if you look at our ratings, that's why I wanted to kind of cap this month at the end of this episode is be like, no, like for real, we're going to recommend things and look at our ratings and then consider like picking one of the four
yeah,
to watch. If you can't commit the time that we do to watching one dang movie a week, because y'all have lives and families like in American Fiction that are real things, you know what? Pick one of the four and enjoy it. And then make conversation in the comments about what you found, what you found in that. Go find the episode and leave us some kind of feedback.
yeah.
We would appreciate it.